Cricket South Africa set aside today to bring misconduct charges to Proteas coach Mark Boucher. These stem from the SJN hearings where former spinner Paul Adams testified that Boucher was part of a group of players who sang a racist song about him. CSA has not been able to respond today on how the process unfolded. But joining me this evening via Zoom is cricket writer Lungani Zama. A very good evening, Mr. Zama. Thanks for taking the time to speak to the sports fans on South Africa tonight. The opening question, what can we expect unfolded when Terry Mutau and Mark Boucher met today? Of course, to determine the timeline needed for the proceedings to commence.
Good evening, Arthur. It's a very difficult one because the time period that it's taken just to get to this point while Mark Boucher is a national coach and they are in bubbles and they're traveling around the world, it's almost lost the initial point of the SJN hearings just in getting to this disciplinary hearing. And again, he's about to leave the country again. So, again, it may be a trial by Zoom as most of the proceedings have been. So I think it's a case of trying to understand the parameters where you can actually charge him, and then based on those charges, what disciplinary measures can be. And, if you're charging him for something as blatant as racism, the onus then becomes on Cricket South Africa to prove that he is in fact racist or was racist. It's a very complicated waters, and, you don't see an easy solution out of this. And, there's legal heavy guns, if you believe media out there, that there's big social media justice warriors waiting to defend Mark Boucher if and when he is taken, if his job is on the line.
Lungani, advocate Dumisa Nzebesa said that, of course, Mark Boucher was apathetic to the diversity and transformation in Cricket South Africa. In fact, for someone who had claimed that he went for training for diversity and transformation in South Africa, he did not show that. His remarks, of course, put him in a bad light. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, the frustration for the SJN hearings was that it was such an exhaustive process, but at the end of it, nothing was really said because it almost felt like an opinion piece that we could have saved millions of rands before getting to it, because there was no really hard foundations for the utterances that were made at the end of it. And it seems more and more that Mark Boucher, if he wasn't South African coach, nothing would have happened to this, just like nothing has happened to the other groups of players that were supposedly singing the same song that he was singing. It felt like an opportunity to help reconcile the game in South Africa and grow and heal. And it's been, it's a hospital pass to the next advocate to make his recommendations on top of recommendations. So at some point, South Africa needs to draw a line and move forward as a united cricket front. And all this happening on the field, the team is actually moving forward, which is ironic.
You did mention in your previous answer that, of course, Mark Boucher is set for the tour of New Zealand in just a few weeks. I mean, here's my next question. Why is it risky that this process is happening just before the tour of New Zealand? This might be unnecessary distraction, but in the spirit of winning systemic racism and the battle in cricket, it must be done.
It must be done. You wonder if the fact that it's become such a public proceeding has forced Cricket South Africa's hand to be seen to be strong or to be seen to be decisive. The fact that it came out in the middle of an important series against India, a lot of people felt it was untimely, but that they need to fix the game. But I don't think they actually know how. And, they're passing the buck to advocates, hoping these advocates come with a miracle solution. But I don't think the people running cricket in South Africa know how to fix issues of the past and imbalances without literal blood on the hands and taking down somebody of a high profile to say, there, we've done our job. And that doesn't fix cricket. It sets a team back, it sets the game back, and it starts another round of exactly what we're dealing with now.
I mean, Lungani, can we expect a final decision on Boucher's racism allegations this week, considering the 10-day quarantine that he must adhere to when he gets to New Zealand?
I think it's tough. We live in South Africa where an allegation of racism is really damning enough. But the fact that Mark Boucher is still in his job tells you just how difficult the onus of proof is to then substantiate those allegations and say, yes, indeed, Mark Boucher is racist. It's a heck of a thing to say. The stain on the character is some would say, is deep enough. But how do you remedy that? Do you take him out of his job and install someone else and take them for racism tests? It's a complicated country and climate that cricket is in. So I don't think Cricket South Africa know what they're doing. They're just hoping that by some miracle, either Mark Boucher walks on principle or in remorse. But there's no easy fixes here, and then whoever makes that decision, there'll be a lot to answer for either way. I'm sure there'll be appeals.
Mr. Zama, in closing, going forward, what lessons can cricket and South African sport learn from this?
I think the biggest lesson that cricket has learned, not just from this Mark Boucher episode, but from just the historical stories that came out of the SJN, is there's a lot of hurt in the game and there were voices that were silenced. And going forward, you can only hope that every voice in every cricket room around the country, whether you're amateur or professional, play for your country, must be heard and given the opportunity to be heard. And that's all you can do. And if you're not, there should be very strict measures in place to make sure that those who silence you don't rise and have positions of influence in cricket. But that's a future remedy for past problems. What you do in the present is far more complicated.
Lungani Zama, cricket writer, thanks for your time. Just speaking to us, of course, after Dermot met up with Mark Boucher, who is currently the Proteas head coach. Of course, allegations of systemic racism against him just before the Proteas are set to go to New Zealand for their tour of New Zealand against the Kiwis. Well, that's all.